Okay, well, Susan, Tom, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Go ahead, kick it off.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and we appreciate this opportunity to kind of join you all today. And I think first of all, maybe we'll do here is kind of set the tone of what we'd like to do here for maybe the next 20 minutes. First of all, maybe take an opportunity for myself to introduce myself, and I'll hand it over to Suzanne, tell us a little about her, and we'll kind of get things going. And we really want to try to make this much like we've seen elsewhere, somewhat interactive. So look, we could easily fill the time talking all you want to hear, but really we're just going to kind of get some things in motion maybe here for about the first 8 to 10 minutes, and hopefully we can have some more exciting dialogue based on questions or anything you have. So I think first of all, what I would like to just say is both Suzanne and I are joining you not on behalf of our parent companies right now, but really from a nonprofit organization called the Society for International Affairs. And that is actually a nonprofit organization. It's over 50 years old, where we partner with the government and industry really to help educate and inform the international trade compliance community. And one of the reasons we do want to say that, and this is not a free advertisement thing, but we did think it was really relevant because we both have regular jobs, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about trade compliance and exportability and stuff. We wanted to be able to refer you back if you needed additional help to places like the Society for International Affairs, SIAED.org, where you can actually access resources and other consultants that actually can assist in this industry. So just kind of an opening remark that I wanted to say. Me personally, just a little bit about myself. I'm actually currently, my real job is as Director of Global Trade Management at Northrop Grumman Corporation, which is a major national global security company. And in my role, really responsible for all the trade compliance policies and procedures, ensuring that those policies and procedures are in place to ensure a compliant company. In addition, I think it's worth mentioning, again, my role with the Society of International Affairs is as the Vice President of that organization. I also serve right now as the Vice Chairman of what's called the Defense Trade Advisory Group, which is a group appointed by the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State to kind of inform the United States government on industry priorities and industry perspectives regarding global trade. So enough about myself. Suzanne, you want to talk a little bit real quick about your job?
So by way of background, I'm Suzanne Kao. Nice to meet everyone on this call today. And I actually am at Deloitte, and I lead our export controls practice globally. And in the form of SIA, I serve as the communications director. But I've been practicing in export controls for over 15 years as a lawyer, and now over 6 years as a consultant. But like Tom, I also do a lot of other kind of volunteer work on other boards that are related to global trade issues. And one of the things I also serve on is the National Council on International Trade Development, which is also another nonprofit that focuses on trade issues as well. So we're really happy to be here today. I think, as Tom had mentioned, the background of SIA is that it is a partnership between industry and the government. So just like what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'll turn it over to you, Tom.
Okay, thank you. So, well, really, one, I want to say, I think Colonel McGeever, I think he is on this line. I thought I saw an IM from him or something pop up there a second ago. But I do want to say, first of all, thank you very much for reaching out to us and giving us this opportunity. And we really do applaud the initiatives of the leadership of the United States Air Force, Department of Transportation, NASA, and all the other organizations that have been part of this discussion over the past several days. We think this is absolutely fantastic. And we realize that we actually have a very unique opportunity over the next 20 minutes or so, because what we have the opportunity to do is share maybe a little bit of a perspective towards our actual government representatives that are joining us here today, and provide some thoughts from industry on how you can make things better for us from an industry side, and really grow this initiative globally. And also maybe share a little bit to maybe help provide some sort of comfort or some kind of advice to others on the phone from an industry side. So maybe one of the first things that we wanted to touch on, and I thought was really important, is early on day one, and if you were able to join in on that, if you weren't, Dr. Roper did a fantastic job introducing this and talked about how there is a commitment to transcending this initiative into the civilian marketplace. And that is just really filled with excitement. And But I think one of the immediate concerns as myself as a trade compliance person becomes as an initiative that is development or is being driven by developmental initiatives from the United States government, from a Department of Defense entity such as the United States Air Force, you automatically pause and say, wow, you're going to make me subject to the Arms Export Control Act in the ITAR. And if you don't know what it is, it better be around long enough. It's conceived as some sort of bad word. It's not, but it's kind of how it's looked at. And so really, I think what I would share to our government representatives on the phone is just something, without getting into detail into the weeds of things like the International Traffic in Arms Regulation, is it is very, very, very important that as requirements, as funding initiatives, as documentation on development or any sort of contracts for development are actually crafted and published to the industry, to make sure specific language is built into those initiatives that actually call out that this is being designed for both civil and military use. Again, I hate to, and I don't want to go into the weeds on something like the International Traffic in Arms Regulation, but there is a specific section in there that says during development, anything that is funded, developmental aircraft funded by the Department of Defense via contract or funding authorization, automatically becomes controlled under the International Traffic in Arms Regulation until it's out of that developmental stage, unless, and that's the key piece, is unless you have it specifically called out in the relevant contracts or funding authorizations that it is being developed for both civil and military use. So the key message there, United States government, to help us on an industry side not become so intertwined in the regulatory matters of defense articles and the International Traffic in Arms Regulation, and actually help us be able to better go global with some of these initiatives. Suzanne, any thoughts or comments on that?
No, I mean, I think to touch upon the point about the contracting vehicle, I think that's really critical. And so coming from it from an industry side, and I think this is a great opportunity to have that kind of dialogue with the government, because of the fact that the USG is really looking to partner with industry. That all of you that are on the phone today, is that, you know, if you're looking at from a export controls, trade compliance perspective, is really looking from cradle to grave. So starting from the very beginning, where you're actually negotiating these contracts, making sure that that language is in there to make sure that it is for civil and military, not just military or silent, is really important. Because if you, as Tom had mentioned, like if you start going down that path of not really defining that up front, it's going to cause a lot more regulatory requirements as you go. So if you're new to the area, and if export controls is something that you haven't been familiar with before, those types of very initial steps in anything, like, so you're involving a lot of parts of your company when looking at this type of activity. So not just from your contracts folks, but also your legal, whoever might be involved in these types of discussions that with your U.S. government partner.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. And kind of one other piece as we tie back, back around to the government side. You will see as this developmental initiative goes on, and you would anticipate this as such, that as you start moving forward in fielding or looking to continue with development initiatives, that folks like the Marine Corps or the Air Force are going to say, hey, I really do need this specific for military. I have to build this out with special capabilities or special technologies, whatever that may be. The key always comes back to how it started. And then you have a really defined breaking point that says, if I am going to be controlled as a military article, then you can easily document it on the industry side where that break actually occurred. But getting it off the ground is really so important. I think the only other piece really that I would offer is a close partnership as you go through this initiative between the military departments such as the United States Air Force with some of those other agencies within the United States government. Don't be afraid to reach out to the Department of State, the Department of Commerce, within DoD, the Defense Technology Security Administration, because there is no better advocate out there anywhere than the military departments that are associated with these programs to help them understand what you're doing, where these initiatives are going, and make them understand that, hey, these are not really controlled at that advanced level, and you support the fact that these are available on, should and be on a broader civilian market. I can sit there from my role at my company and do that all day long, but I will always be looked at differently than you from the United States Air Force position walking in that same thing. So I would continue to encourage such engagements along those lines. Sliding on to one other piece regarding the U.S. government side is I find it really interesting early on, and there's been a number of dialogues and discussions regarding airworthiness certification. And the only thing I would throw out there on that is airworthiness certification on platforms such as this are absolutely essential. And we heard a lot about the difficulties in obtaining that airworthiness certification and some of the challenges and in such a overwhelming amount of support to go ahead and help see that through. Now imagine trying to do that in the European Union or in other countries where right now we have all the US entities together and trying to help support that and help drive that. You can imagine the exportability challenges that may come as I want to go ahead and now fly these wonderful machines around the European Union or around countries elsewhere, and making sure that you continue as much as you can wherever you can, help provide the support and help carry industry through some barriers regarding airworthiness certification as we work with other countries. Suzanne, I know you had some other things you want to talk about. I'll throw it back to you for a second.
And actually, I think one of the questions from a participant is about, if you're a startup company and how do you ensure about having the most flexible export mechanism and where should we go? What kind of advice do we have? I think we actually, in our initial discussion, Tom touched on it and I touched on it, is, in the sense of having that partnership, having that dialogue with the U.S. government agencies, making sure that they understand what it is that is being developed and getting that comfort level. Certainly another piece is having that initial contract piece of making sure that it is going to be deemed civil or dual use, so to speak. And so that way, that sort of sets the path forward as you start building out your technology, making sure that from an export classification perspective that it falls not under the State Department side, but falls under the Commerce side. So not to get into the weeds, but there's two main regulatory agencies in the US that control this type of technology, whether it's military or it's dual use. So if you can make sure that on a contract level that you have it as a dual use item, and then as it develops, continues to stay that way, then that will really help you from an export perspective and making it a lot easier just because of how the two different regulations work. It doesn't mean that it's export control free. It's just that it's generally less restrictive on the Commerce side than on the State Department side. But really, because this is new technology, and in a lot of ways, there's also a lot of discussion around emerging technology on the Commerce side and how that's going to be controlled. And certainly some of these types of vehicles and are potentially going to be using that kind of technology. It's really evolving. So I think when you're looking at getting into this business, and a lot of you already are in this business, is really understanding how to set up your compliance program correctly to make sure that you don't have any problems, compliance issues along the way. So again, it's sort of a cradle to grave, looking at not just from the contracting piece, but looking at how you're developing it, what kind of R&D is being done, who's being involved in that type of work, and then certainly looking at what kind of policies and procedures that you might have, because from a compliance perspective, while you're partnering with the government from an enforcement perspective, that people are going to look at what you have as a formalized program. Now, it's not a one-size-fits-all, because a lot of you on this call are probably from startups and from small companies, and some of you are from very large established companies. And so you're going to have to see what fits your business, and also certainly what is your risk tolerance when it comes to export controls, and also what part of the entire technology that you're going to be involved in, whether you're going to be part of the supply chain or you're going to be the OEM, and those are all things that you're going to want to consider. I don't know, Tom, if you have some other thoughts to that.
No, I think I agree 100%. I think that, and I think that almost you kind of almost touched on another thing I was going to talk. And I saw one of the chat pop-ups there that said, "Hey, is ITAR reform ever really going to happen?" And wow, great question. We're right with you. But you know, it is. I would offer to you along those lines that in a way the reform is happening, and it happens very slowly. I think there's a lot of initiatives out there. But right in line with that ITAR reform, or if you just really look at overall exportability in some of the reform initiatives out there, it was another message we thought was really important to share with you on the industry side as well as on the government side. And that is stay in tune with some of the initiatives that are out there. If you look at what we have going on right now with this Agility Prime initiatives and these type of aircraft, some of the discussion has transitioned into the unmanned systems. Unmanned systems are one of our biggest barriers right now from a trade compliance perspective, a lot of times because unmanned systems continue to be really looked at as missiles and covered under certain regimes like the Missile Technology Control Regime. It complicates the ability to do certain things on the global marketplace. Their current administration has been pushing very hard to go ahead and loosen some of that restrictions. And I think continuing to have that emphasis, the support of the United States Air Force, the support of other agencies to continue to move those things. So there are efforts out there to reform, is kind of what I'd say. And we need to continue from a government side where you can continue to push some of those reforms, understanding you still have the national security considerations that must be put in place. And from an industry side, to have an active voice on there. And that kind of translates well into things like emerging technologies and some of that Suzanne just mentioned, these advanced technologies. There's always that challenge of how do we maintain a competitive edge over some of our potential adversaries, but allowing for the growth of a free market in a global marketplace. So Suzanne, I think you had a couple notes you were going to touch on some of the emerging technology stuff.
Yeah, so. And I think to that point, I think because of the fact that it is evolving, and from various different discussions in the sense that because of the fact that it is emerging, so it's cutting edge, it's new, and so there's an uncertainty around it, which obviously causes maybe some more sensitivity around the national security implications, the foreign policy implications, than as these technologies develop, whether it's AI or advanced materials or anything like that, which certainly can be integrated into a lot of these types of vehicles that are in unmanned vehicles and systems that might be developed to support this effort. So, I think it's just having those touch points with the government. I think because of this is a great opportunity such as Agility Prime, and having those continuous discussions, getting folks comfortable about what is being developed and understand there is a partnership, and also that there are ways in which to keep it so that we are still from a U.S. perspective, and we're taking it from a U.S. regulatory perspective, that we're ahead of the game. So I think with that, we may be running out of time, but I think we do have some of those questions, and certainly, we have them on, and if there's any that haven't been answered, we could always circle back with the organizers to try and get them answered for you. So thank you for participating.
Absolutely. If anybody has any specific questions for Susan or Tom, please don't hesitate. You can still use all the possible Zoom, Slack, and other channels to contact them, and we'll make sure that the connection happens. If anybody else still has a last minute question, because now the way that so now we're finished here. So participants can go back to the agility.com webpage, and there they have to log in and select a new breakout room. So you have to leave this Zoom and then go back to the main page and then choose another breakout. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Tom, Susan, do you see there was a last
yeah, there's a couple more questions. I mean, we could actually, if you want, we can actually just, well, they're not going to be in the next session, but we could always just touch upon it as a talking point.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I guess
loop back.
Did our 20 minutes start when you started letting them in, or did our 20 minutes start when actually because I started running my timer and I'm like, I still got 4 minutes left there. We can answer more questions. And you said 1 minute. I was like, whoa. So I think it must start as soon as they said go and they started filling the room, because I actually was running the clock. I got lost there. So.
Yes, no, time is a very tricky thing when it comes to parallel processing. Yes, okay. It is never your time. It is always
okay.
Yeah.
So Betty, when do we start again?
In 1 minute, I would say.
Oh, in 1 minute. Okay. So I have
you
time.
Can go for it.
I have time to run to the restroom.
Well, Tom will start.
I can kick it off, and Betty's going to have some of the introductory comments.
Okay.
I won't tell them where you're at.
So
how, did it come across okay?
Yeah. No, definitely. I think people were quite reactive. They were also having some information in between them. So you are now seeing the chats?
I'm not. I see them when they pop up on the screen, but unless I open up the chat window.
Okay, no problem.
Honestly...
I'm just gonna read 2 questions that came in at the end. What legal challenges should we expect as autonomy and avionics startup company? Wait, what legal challenges?
I actually just brought it up. So what legal challenges should we expect as autonomy and avionics startup company that is willing to employ international engineers while working on civil applications? And what risks may we have in future pivoting our focus from civil to military applications in that case? These are not one-line questions, or they may be 5-minute philosophical discussions. I mean, there's a lot of challenges unless you structure it right from the beginning.
Well, maybe you can touch upon it as saying that it's probably one of those things that people worry about, and then maybe hint them towards, I don't know, places where they could find information on that.
Okay. Something. Yeah, we can. Let's see how we would address that one. Legal challenges.
Okay, so we got 21 waiting. Let me open it up.
That was fast.
Yeah.
Give it.
I'm impressed.
Give it 30 seconds while these people are all dialing in, and because they have to accept it. So 20 waiting. So I'm gonna open it up now. Okay.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome for the second round of this presentation. We're together with Susan and Tom, and we're talking about international trade and compliance regulations. All of you are on mute, but please don't hesitate to share any questions you may have in the chat channel. Our presenters, together with me, are looking at it, and we'll try to address as much as we can. So, Susan, Tom, over to you guys.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we just did this once, so we should be better this second round, and we're going to try to talk faster. Our real goal here is to give you an opportunity to ask questions, and we actually address some of those, but we're going to kind of tee up a couple subjects. First of all, I think it's really important for us to introduce ourselves. Both Suzanne and I come from an organization called the Society for International Affairs. It's a major nonprofit organization that really was established for 50 years ago to really bring government and industry together to address trade compliance matters and trade compliance issues, and really focus on the education of the broader community. If you need more information on that, it is available at www.siaed.org, and we can share that with you later. It's not so much a public service announcement as much as you may, if you go there, is a great source to go find a consultant database if you say, hey, I might need some more specific guidance or anything on this. From myself, my name is Tom Donovan. I am the Director of Global Trade Management at Northrop Grumman Corporation, and I am the Vice President of the Society for International Affairs as well. In addition, I serve as the Vice Chairman of the Defense Trade Advisory Group to the U.S. Department of State, which is an organization to advise the government on trade compliance matters. Suzanne?
Hi, I'm Suzanne Kao. Nice to meet everyone. I am the Global Export Controls Leader for Deloitte, and I also serve on the SIA board as a Communications Director, as well as the board on National Council for International Trade Development, which is also a nonprofit that focuses on trade. So we're really glad that we can all be here today, and we look forward to a great discussion.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. And yeah, so really to kick this thing off, for those that, and hopefully we have a good mix of government and industry on the line. And I will tell you from, we are very happy and to be able to speak with you here today. And I think we have a unique opportunity. And what we're going to try to do is speak a little bit to the government representatives who are here from an industry side and share our perspectives back to the government, how they can really help as we try to take this as a global initiative. And then we're going to talk a little bit to those on the industry side that may help you a little bit if you're not used to dealing on a bigger, broader global market on such emerging activities such as this. So kind of really to start, I think it was one of the important messages that I wanted to get across. This is more of a message to the United States government, folks in the United States Air Force. We are thrilled with this with this initiative, and we think it is absolutely fantastic. And as we heard remarks from Dr. Roper on day one, talking about how far forward leaning the United States Air Force would be with this initiative, something that got my attention was really calling out the fact that there is nothing more important as we go through this process than for the United States Air Force and others to actually make sure we take the time and document that this initiative is not being done specifically for the United States military, but it is being done for both the civil commercial market as well as the United States military market. I don't want to get deep into specific regulatory matters, but there is a piece within the regulations that's worth mentioning, which basically says any developmental aircraft funded by the Department of Defense is going to be considered controlled under the International Traffic in Arms Regulation while it's in that developmental stage. And the caveat to that is that unless there is specific language that's actually built into the DoD contract or other funding mechanisms or funding authorizations, that the development is actually for a civil and military application. So such a critical step, really just getting us out the gate here. So as this kind of branches out and we take the steps forward on this, making sure that documentation is actually correctly annotated, you will help us on the industry immensely and prevent us from having to go fight day after day after day with some of the broader regulatory organizations to convince them that this really is exportable and for a civilian market. Suzanne, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that that's a really, really important point. And when we're thinking about export controls and trade compliance generally, you know, we do think, at least, you know, from an industry or consulting side, is that we do think of it as a cradle to grave process. So, you know, what Tom touched on about the contracting piece, you know, that's actually the first, you know, that's sort of the first stage gate in which we need to make sure from a terms and conditions perspective that that kind of language is in there to make sure that, you know, it doesn't get captured by the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, which is the State Department side, and deeming it automatically military because of the lack of that language or the vagueness in the language. And so to the extent that there's any sort of negotiation or control around that at the get-go would always be beneficial for industry to be able to do so, because of the fact that the commerce side, that is also the other side of the house of the export controls, is less restrictive than the ITAR State Department side. Tom?
So thanks, Suzanne. One other piece on kind of along this matter with messaging with our government regulators and how we craft things. There's a piece that I would offer to anyone from the Air Force side or any of the government agencies that may be involved with this, is that your open dialogue and engagement on subjects like this in discussing with the Department of State, the Department of Commerce, and within the Department of Defense's Defense Technology Security Administration, in making sure we're having upfront conversations within the government about what this initiative is, what it's going to be used for, and help pave that way that it clearly is it has an equal commercial applicability and a civil applicability. By being there and helping do that, you will greatly enhance our ability going forward to take this onto the global market. You will always, as the advocate for this technology to those organizations, you will always be a better advocate than myself from an industry side going to have that dialogue or have that conversation. So it's just such a critical aspect in a way that the government can really help move this forward for those in industry as we try to take this global. A quick transition there, just a brief shout out that I thought was worth mentioning was airworthiness certification. I had the ability to actually dial into a couple different panels here this week, not the entire time, but there was definitely enough discussion regarding airworthiness certification of these platforms from the various agencies. And they also talked about the challenges of airworthiness certifications. Well, think about those airworthiness certifications here in the United States, and then just imagine if it's handed off to the private industry companies and say, go figure that out in the European market, or go figure that out in the Asian market, and you go work through independently airworthiness certification issues in these countries. The ask or the observation really is, where applicable, where you can help pave the way on that global market. There will be challenges for industry, and if left alone to go figure it out on their own, it will significantly cause delays. Whereas with the United States government, with the government support, be it at the United States Air Force, Department of Transportation, etc., we will have the ability to actually go global with a product like this and do it in a much more rapid, profitable, and beneficial manner. So, Suzanne, over to you.
Sure. And so taking it from the industry side, and given that a lot of the companies that, and a lot of you might be coming from startup companies that are new to this whole export control world, and that, one of the things that I always see that is very helpful is that knowing this upfront, knowing that the fact that there is these regulatory requirements and considerations as you develop this burgeoning technology, that you're partnering with the government or partnering with your supply chain or other or other sort of business partners, to having some sort of structure around export controls, because of the fact that if it's not going to be under the ITAR, which is the State Department side, it will be under the Commerce Department. So both agencies are going to somehow potentially have involvement in how you do business. So as to, one of the questions that we got was about whether we want to, if you're a startup company and you are looking at using international engineers. So that will have a huge impact as to, whether if it's an ITAR considered military or it's considered dual use, and how you are able to use non-US persons in your development activities. So thinking about from a compliance perspective, you really want to think about it, as I mentioned earlier, cradle to grave. So everything from the beginning part of the contracting all the way through the research and development to even the sales cycle, as to how you partner and who you're selling it to, how you're selling it, whether you're using brokers or other types of individuals or entities to help you get the market, to everything to, the delivery process and who you're sourcing, who are your supply chain providers, where are they based, what kind of materials are you receiving, to everything to the delivery. And then after delivery, what are your contractual obligations, or what are you looking to contract for from a profit perspective of maintenance and delivery? And all those things have various different export control touch points that you have to be aware of as you get into this business. And then certainly, not only are you looking at the vehicles themselves that you might be, whether you're the OEM, but then you're also looking at all the different kind of technologies that might be built into the vehicle. So whether you're using emerging technology, whether you're using AI, or you're using advanced materials, or if you're using some positioning navigation technology. So all those types of things may have export control implications that you just need to be aware of, and having that awareness and knowing how to navigate these various different potential minefields and different hurdles will really help you get ahead of the game, rather than falling behind and having some compliance issues along the way. Tom, did you have anything that you might want to add to that?
No, I think that's a great transition, kind of maybe to another point I thought was worth mentioning towards the government. And you brought up emerging technologies, and there were questions on our previous panel that talked about, hey, where is the government, and where are they at in reforming some of our export control regulations? And emerging technologies is kind of part of that reform that's ongoing right now. And what I would offer is, while we always have, as the government is looking to reform and industry is pushing for reform of these regulations, we need to be mindful, and not only on the industry side, but also from a government side. That we need to be mindful on how we grow our businesses such as this on the global marketplace, yet still be able to protect this technology from our adversaries and not giving them some sort of cutting edge advantage over the United States. So there's such a unique and fine line balance here. So I think it's just worth sharing that we really do applaud the initiatives that are going on with the United States government to do reform and drive some sort of reform. Specifically, even it's not so much maybe emerging technologies, is the unmanned aerial vehicles and UAS reform that it has been supported by the administration to this point, and for various reasons, it moves forward at times and slows like anything. But to continue to move forward with loosening controls on unmanned platforms. The dialogue earlier in this week was all about taking this not just from some vertical and takeoff electronically powered platform, but it's also going into an autonomous platform in developing UAS technology and taking it globally. And things like the missile technology control regime that controls our UAVs, it can be a hindrance to that. So while we recognize the needs for controls, we need to be smarter in how we control things, that we can do so keeping it out of our the hands of our adversaries, but also enabling global growth. That's a tough one to say. So Suzanne, I haven't seen any questions popping in, so if there's any questions, please throw them out here. We'll go back to you.
So we did have one question that said, what risks may we have in the future pivoting our focus from civil to military applications? And so I think this sort of touches on the reverse of what I was saying. That, you know, if you are fortunate enough to make sure that you've got all your stuff and it's considered a dual use, so a commercial item, but you're looking into entering the military space, or because your government partner is asking for some bells and whistles that are not going to be, you know, that's solely for them, then that may potentially push it into the military side. And so there's a whole slew of different things that you're going to have to consider, because there's different, from that regulatory environment, there's different registration requirements, there's different licensing requirements, there's also more restrictions on sharing that kind of technology and involvement in services and data with non-US persons. And so there's a variety of different things that you're going to have to consider if you are moving from the commercial space to the military space. Now, of course, the military can certainly purchase and use commercial items just like anyone else, but it's if the question is really about really truly becoming a military item, that opens up a whole door, a floodgate of other considerations. And so when you're thinking about your compliance program in your companies, you do need to think about how it has to be fluid. So then as your business changes, you want to consider how you're going to have to evolve your compliance posture, what your procedures are going to be, who you employ, how you employ them, what kind of tasks that they're going to be involved in. I don't know, Tom, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think you, yeah, exactly. I totally agree. And I think it almost kind of goes back to one of the things we're talking about that I would offer about in the beginning, is making sure you're clearly documenting everything as you go. So as your documentation, as you're transitioning, is just so important. So you actually know when you're breaking away, and understanding when you're integrating export control things at a higher export control, and how that impacts your overall platform. So that's the only thing I would really add on top of that, is it kind of almost goes full circle to the comments that you had made earlier. We make to the government about documentation, but you about some of that record keeping and internal compliance program, and making sure you're tracking when things may start breaking out into that trade compliance or higher trade compliance requirements. Yeah. I did see a question pop up here. Do you have any specific advice with regards to protection of technology and IP with bad actors such as China? You know, Suzanne does a lot of work more with individual companies. I don't know if she can offer a little bit more specifics, but I think what I would offer to you is in really going back to some of what the regulations are. You kind of nailed with that question, the global question, or the question that's really across our United States government, I would say, on how do we continue to do this. It was actually our legislative branch in Congress that really kind of drove that we need to start really looking at how are we actually protecting our emerging technologies, and actually enhancing some of the protections around those things, in making these bad actors that may be out there to steal our technology more accountable. So things like The Committee for Reform on Foreign Investments, I think I just messed that up, but basically this the CFIUS process really looks at like where you're investing technology and who's investing in what, how are they coming in to try to get a hold of your technology. There's a very robust process to try to oversee that and govern it. I think, Suzanne, you were actually going to talk a little bit about CFIUS if we had time.
Yeah, so CFIUS, so the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, their reach has broadened since February, and so before it was looking at acquisitions. Now it's actually even looking at transactions, and so that's to Tom's point about protecting U.S. technology from potential foreign acquisition, and even not even through an merger and acquisition position, but even just various different business transactions. But generally speaking, I think to the question about protecting technology and IP probably from a broader scale is looking at just what kind of systems, and this is probably more of an operational perspective, is looking at what kind of systems, what kind of access controls, whether you're using cloud for storage, like how are those being set up. Those are going to be very important. So, export controls and cyber are very integrated because of the natural concerns. I mean, we've been working with a lot of different clients on that, and just even like geo-IP blocking and those types of things where, when you're looking at your systems as to what you have to consider because of the pervasiveness of various different bad actors when it comes to that kind of technology. So.
Yeah, and even a couple of that, another thing I know that you had typed up as a potential topic of discussion was the internal technology control plans, and that's a lot of what we're alluding to here is having a robust technology control plan. And you know what, that is not easy. And I would love to sit here and say, oh, just put that out there. But as you've put these technology control plans in place, sometimes in order to truly protect, you end up potentially hindering your own self. I mean, when you have engineers that need to talk freely, and whether or not they're doing it over Zoom or whatever, there's things that you have to be concerned about. So how much you control, and it's all about balancing and managing that risk. So a robust, close partnership with your cybersecurity folks, your IT departments, with your infosec, with your just actual physical security teams, and being partners with them and having these robust technology control plans. It's just so essential, and doing it at the right size for your company so that it enables you to go ahead and have that dialogue. But the bottom line is, you're right. The bad actors such as China, they're out there, they're looking, and they're not going to stop. So it's a constant, continuous process of improving your technology control plan.
Great, thank you. If nobody else has any more questions, Susan, last words of advice for our participants?
Sure. I think that when it comes to export controls, it's a convoluted, it's very frustrating set of regulations on multiple fronts. But I think that one of the things that I always see is that if you can get ahead of it and really sort of get something in place, and again, it's not a one size fits all, but it does, especially given a lot of your companies, is that it does create a strategic advantage for you when it comes to growing your business and growing opportunities, because then your government partners will have a comfort level that you know what you're doing, and then and then also you're able to execute and be able to win more business because of the fact that you have a compliance program, because that you can give that comfort level to your ultimate customers, or even to your supply chain or to your partners. And so I think that's critical, and certainly there's a lot of folks out there that can assist you to the extent that you're not familiar with that, and we're glad that we could have this dialogue with you today, so really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. So you can go back to the AFWERX Agile Prime website now, or you can also visit the AFWERXchallenge.com, where there's more challenges and military questions that you can discover. Thank you very much, and see you on another Zoom call.